Michelangelo. The name brings to our mind great artistry, architecture, and sculpture. To say his name is to be reminded of the Sistine Chapel, especially the ceiling at the Vatican in Rome. Yet time and again, Michelangelo left that work, tiring of it, to return to his beloved native Florence, only to be coaxed back by the Pope, insisting that he finish his work. When we think of his name, we think of those statues of Moses or David. What we may not remember, however, is that he left far more works unfinished than finished. In the scarcity of, or in the sacristy rather, of a church in Florence, the unfinished masterpieces of Michelangelo were gathered together, and by count, he left more works unfinished than complete. But isn't this so typical of so many of our lives? It's a wonderful thing to be able to look at the work of our lives and say, it's finished. The world-famous Cecil Rhodes, who was known across the continent, said as his last words, "So much to do, so little done." That sense of incompleteness is the exact opposite of what we have heard today in the Scriptures as the triumphant shout of Jesus from the cross, "It is finished." What do you suppose the most significant word in human history might be? In human history. Was it a word of wisdom uttered by a philosopher like Socrates or Aristotle? Was it a word spoken by a poet who in perfect rhyme and meter arrived at just the right term? Was it spoken by a statesman, a Churchill, a Lincoln, or a Roosevelt? Or was it this word, which Jesus cried out from the cross, that has inspired the ages? It is finished. Indeed, in the words of the New Testament Koine Greek, it is only a singular word. Often the case with Greek. It takes us several words to translate the nuances of one of their words, and this word is tetelestai in Koine Greek. You'll find it stamped in red on your bulletin. Tetelestai. It is a word of brevity. You see, when a task has been accomplished, it can be spoken of in brevity. There needs to be no ambiguity when a task is finished. There doesn't have to be a great deal of verbiage. When a task is done, it's enough to say, finished. Remember Caesar's three-word message, Veni, Vidi, Vici? I came, I saw, I conquered. It was enough to be said. It was a word of brevity and a word of intensity. According to Matthew, Mark, and Luke's Gospels, Jesus shouted out his last words on the cross. He received that sop of vinegar from the soldiers gathered at the foot of the cross in order that he might clear his throat and moisten his tongue. And after that, he could cry out, Tetelestai, it is finished. If you look at it grammatically, you can describe it as a third-person singular perfect passive indicative verb. I know you were all waiting to hear that. To say that almost conjures up the dryness and deadness that we envision grammar as, but it is important. It is the third-person singular, which means Jesus was not speaking of himself, but of something else when he said, "It is finished." We'll see in a moment what he referred to by that pronoun it, the antecedent of which we have to find in "it is finished." He did not say in the first person, "I am finished." He said in the third person singular, "it is finished." He had in mind something of significance that was stated poignantly in the perfect tense of the Greek language, which indicates that a mighty act had been achieved and the results would abide. It was as if someone had stepped in wet cement and it had hardened and left a footprint, as if those words had been chiseled for all time in some kind of marble or granite that time could never erase. "It is finished," he said. It was spoken in the indicative, which is certainty. Had there been any question about it, he might have said in the subjunctive, "It may be finished. It should be finished." But he didn't say that. He said, "It is finished." Not only that, but that passive voice indicates that he had been acted upon by some great intention, some great force. He did not say, "I finished it." Putting that mighty deed out there, he said, "It is finished." It has been acted upon by the purposes of God, by the promises and prophecies of the Old Testament. It is finished. That word tetelestai, the verb in the third person singular passive perfect indicative, catches in itself that mighty sweep of God in history. The substantive essence of that verb is the word telos. It gives us telephone, telegraph, television. It has about it the sense of that which has reached its goal, that which has come to ripen to maturity, that which has come to full completion. When Jesus said tetelestai, he was saying, "I have finished the right purposes of God, and they have now been delivered to their appropriate and full intention." In the 19th century, in Egypt, where the sands are dry, pieces of papyrus that dated from the time of the New Testament were discovered by Adolf Deisman and others. They were business papers, correspondence, real estate papers, papers from the marketplace of life. That papyrus in the dryness of the sands of Egypt had never turned brittle, never faded. It was like finding a treasure trove. And as they began to look through these papyri, they had written on them the very kind of language, the Koine Greek, that was spoken in the New Testament. It was the popular Greek. It wasn't classical Greek. It was the popular Greek of the people. And they began to discover the same words we have in the New Testament. And up to that time, it had been thought that the New Testament had been written in some sort of special sacred Greek because it was different than classical Greek. But now they found no, this was the language of the marketplace. This was the language of the street. And they found this word tetelestai, and they found it on documents that had been signed and where debts had been paid and the transaction had been completed, and it meant paid in full. There is a sense in which the whole of the Old Testament was a deed waiting to be signed. Since outside the gates of Eden, as sin, failure, and guilt cast its shadow and eclipsed the human race of patriarchs and kings and prophets, it was delivered up to that cross as if it were something that demanded the signature to bring it to pass. And when Jesus said, "It is finished," it was as if he took the 39 books of that old covenant and wrote across them the name Messiah, Jesus Christ. Finished. Not only that, when they dug in the sands of the desert, they found that this word, tetelestai, when they sealed a deal and when it was absolutely done, when it was absolutely complete, and nothing else needed to be added to it. The word tetelestai was used. It was a word of completeness. Jesus said, the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom price for many. And if that is the case, what is it that is finished?